Hey everyone, Jen here. I'm the founder and executive director of the Muddy Pug Farm and Sanctuary outside of Maple Valley, Washington, and we are continuing on in our series about the awesome book by the Cloven Heart Farm Sanctuary, One Day I Want to Have a Farm Sanctuary. We're going through chapter 1, which covers the fantasy versus reality of sanctuary work, and the section that we're going to be covering is called No is a Four-Letter Word. Why would we say that in the sanctuary community? Well, what we discovered as we opened our doors and we welcomed in new residents, we welcomed in the community, and we really set the scope of our work, we found that drawing boundaries and limits about the kind of work that we were going to do, how we ran the sanctuary, even what kind of residents we were willing to take on, and what sort of things we were going to engage with the community on was way harder than it actually looks. When you are thinking of the different buckets of the work that we do, so our mission is to save lives, to give sanctuary, and to build community. And in each of those buckets, we have sort of different work streams that we do on the sanctuary. And those work streams are pretty defined. And over certainly the last 2 years, we have created a much clearer framework of what it means to do each bucket of work, so that when decisions come up, we are able to make those decisions fairly efficiently. And if the framework needs to adjust, then we adjust it very quickly based on our circumstances, so that we are not spending the mental load. We've talked about the mental load before. We are not expending that mental load in the day-to-day to grind through decision point after decision point after decision point. So the first area where it is important for you to say no and understand what you're about is what it means to save lives. And I'm gonna multitask a bit. We're gonna do some brushing for some winter floofs. So when we talk about saving lives on our sanctuary, you know, we talked in our last segment about the controversy about paying for residents and whether you want to directly intervene in residents' lives to save them from slaughter auctions and meat brokers. And that is a really important decision to come to philosophically. And again, you know, that is a hotly debated topic. I will just prepare you that regardless of your decision and whatever reasons you feel are valid for making that decision, 100% somebody out there is gonna throw you some shade, as the young ones say, for whatever decision you make. So as long as you are solid in you and why you are making that decision around how you are taking on and taking residents on, good for you, my friends. So that's a first decision to come to about what you want to say yes or no to. The other thing that you will want to be prepared for is really understanding, like, based on your finances, again, which we talked about last time, you know, based on your finances, what kind of cases you can say yes to. And so you may need to make a decision, for example, that you might take in relatively healthy surrenders who are coming from private residences or people who can no longer care for their animals. And that is because those animals still need a home. Otherwise, they're just going to be routed or flipped into the slaughter auctions. And it's perfectly fine for you to say, look, like, we don't have the capacity, we don't have the bandwidth, we don't have the infrastructure or a quarantine area. Certainly, if you don't have the finances to take on a significant medical case or an abuse case, neglect case, dude, just say no. You can certainly say no, and you can put out a call potentially to other sanctuaries or rescue operations that might be able to assist that particular animal. And we actually had exact situation develop over the weekend. So our friends at the Onalaska Farm Sanctuary received a call about a baby goat that was just a week old that got stepped on by a cow. And, like, This poor baby goat was stepped on, had what seemed to be a crushing injury to its shoulder, which would require pretty extensive, at least x-rays, if not other medical care, and potentially pretty substantial ongoing management. And God bless Jess and Kyle and the Onalaska Sanctuary for really employing this framework so well, of like having the self-awareness to say, you know, we don't have the capacity, we don't have the budget, and we don't have the bandwidth to take on a significant medical case right now, but we can step in and help to the best of our current capacity. And so they put out a call to the sanctuary community. As I mentioned, we all talk amongst ourselves. And there was a big discussion about like, how can we help? Who could we help? And so we then turned around and connected Jess and Kyle and the team at the Onalaska Farm Sanctuary with a much more robustly funded local rescue that right now is in the thick of kidding season and taking on baby goats. They were just in a much better position to help this little goat, and they had the budget, they had the bandwidth. Their vet lives like next door to them, and so it was just a better situation all around. And you know, the lesson in that is sometimes it feels very bad to say no, okay? And I myself often struggle with like saying no, because you think about, well, like, what does it say about me if I say no? And sometimes it feels really good to say yes. It feels really good to like pull through for somebody and be the hero, even if it's at your own expense, but that is not always the right thing for everybody involved. And the lesson in this particular situation is like, there were two sanctuaries that needed to say no, but we were still able to provide some help within our capacity, and it turned out okay. It actually, I would hazard a guess to say it probably turned out better than if we took on that little goatie. So, you know, as you think about running your sanctuary, and as you think about running your life in general, like thinking about what is okay for you to take on is okay for you to take on, and what you feel is not okay for you to take on, you don't have to take it on. And this is such a difficult lesson for us all to learn in life, isn't it? But as you grow up to be a grown-ass adult, one of the amazing things that you get to do as a grown-ass adult is you get to make those decisions for yourself. And if you're running a sanctuary, you get to make those decisions for your sanctuary. The other thing that you should feel okay about saying no to as you are starting up your sanctuary is there is literally a wall of unwanted animals that gets thrown at sanctuaries almost every day. I cannot tell you, like today alone, I got a call for 2 roosters, I got a call for a lamb, I got a call for a goat, and then, oh God, some poor person called about a horse. And right now we are just closed for new intakes. And so, you know, we had to tell these people no, and some people are very gracious and understanding, and we try to give them referrals to other rescues and sanctuaries that we know have capacity. And other people get super belligerent, and they are very vocal about how you're a sanctuary or you're a rescue and you exist and you take money from the community, and so you should take on the animal that they are trying to get rid of. And for someone who has done a mountain of therapy, I can tell you right now that whenever somebody says you should do something, that person does not have like your best interest in mind. So you can feel okay, even when you are taking direct pleas from people to have animals surrendered, that you don't have to answer that call, and you can say no. And that's not a 4-letter word, because ultimately your ability to sustain your sanctuary and provide the best care to all of the residents including yourself, is so incredibly important. You should feel empowered to say no. And that sort of bleeds into the conversation about saving lives. And this is a really tricky part of sanctuary work that we need to talk about. And, you know, coming out of this past winter, we have had, over the last 5 years of existence, like, we have been super fortunate that our residents over the last 5 years have been relatively healthy. This past, like, through the summer into the winter of 2023 and even into the beginning of 2024 has been a very tough time for us in terms of resident health. And, you know, partially it's because we have more residents than we had in the beginning, right? So that makes sense that there would be potentially a higher frequency. In the past year, we also took on a couple of more neglect cases than we had previously. So residents in those situations are harder to recover. But the thing about, you know, having residents fall ill, I don't know that it necessarily means saying no, but it does mean saying no to extending their lives beyond a time frame where they are going to have the best quality of life. And many people think about this with their companion animals, and dealing with the residents on the sanctuary is certainly no different. Like, we want to ensure that the residents have the best life that they possibly can, as long as they have a good quality of life. And so as a sanctuary, like, we have spent a lot of time thinking about what does it mean to have a good quality of life. And that is so important because the individual cases, the relationship that you have with a resident, of course, the emotions that are involved in caring for a specific resident, when you are in those situations and you are trying to, like, grind through the stress of having a resident that's really ill, you are trying to manage, like, lots of sleepless nights, a lot of stress, that is not the time to try to, like, think through all the different intricacies of what it means to save a life, to extend a life, to continue to provide medical care for a resident. When we think about resident health, I actually took some time to write down my thoughts on, like, what it means to have a good quality of life. And what it means for us is that, first and foremost, they cannot be in a significant and visible amount of pain for an extended period of time. And that is a time in which, like, they are immobilized by the pain that they are in and they cannot get out of that. So it's one thing if we can treat them with an anti-inflammatory or pain medication so that they are able to, like, get up and move around, they can eat and drink normally, and their pain level is managed. But if it appears to be a continuous and unmanageable amount of pain, we do not let that go on, certainly indefinitely. We have never had a resident go that long in terms of pain. They've always had other sort of additional things that were going on with their health, but that is a primary thing. The second criteria that we look at is, you know, is their specific disease treatable? And if it is treatable, is that something that will return them to a reasonable level of functioning so that they have a good quality of life? So, like, let's say Swishy here fell and he broke his leg and all he could do was lay down all the time. Not only would that be very dangerous for him as a cow and a ruminant, he just would not have a good quality of life. And so that is something that we factor in, is a resident's ability and our ability to help them heal to the point where they can have a good quality of life. And the third component, kind of, I hinted at it just a bit there, is whether or not their health issue is recoverable. So there are some health issues that a resident may not ever actually recover from, but there's not a lot you can do about it, and they can still maintain a relatively reasonable quality of life. And Scribbles is an awesome example of that. So Scribbles is a goat who his front legs have collapsed paternas, which means that, you know, his goat leg is supposed to be like this and it's actually like this. Dude can still get around like a champ, super mobile, eats and drinks normally, has awesome socialization with the rest of the herd, and that's a chronic condition that like we would let go, and we will let Scribbles kind of go until he can go no longer. On the opposite end of the spectrum, and this is a case that we haven't really talked about it on social media because it is such a sad case, and it deals with one of our original residents, Yo-Yo. And Yo-Yo came to the sanctuary with his mom Yumi and his sister Keiko and Aunt Ruby, of course. And Yo-Yo is a relatively young goat, but just within, you know, the last 3 months or so, one of our sanctuary helpers noticed that Yo-Yo had sort of a something in his mouth, and it looked like some kind of like sore or abscess. And so we called our vet, Toot Sweet, and our vet came out and looked at it, and just in the time from when we first saw it until our vet was available, it almost doubled in size, and it was in his mouth, and it was starting to like move across into the center of his mouth. And our amazing vet came out and did some x-rays of Yo-Yo's mouth, and it was determined that it was a fast-growing tumor in his mouth. And we waited a bit because we were wondering if we gave him antibiotics, if there was like an infection as a comorbidity issue, then perhaps an infection was inflaming that tumor to the point where it could be treated another way. Unfortunately, after a course of aggressive antibiotics, the tumor kept growing. It grew to the point over a few days where it started intruding into his jaw, and it was like eating through his jawbone. And at that point, we just made the call, like if something were to happen where the tumor kept growing, Austin's getting his scratchies. If the tumor kept growing and it like snapped the other side of his jaw or caused an immediate injury, he would have been in an incredible amount of pain. It would have been terrible and scary for him. It would have been terrible and scary for the other residents in senior living. And so we made the compassionate choice to help him cross the Rainbow Bridge. And that's a place where, again, like as a sanctuary, boy howdy, the Monday morning quarterbacking that goes on around like, who do you save and why do you do that, and why do you like give this resident health care, and why'd you make the decision to help this, you know, resident transition. There is a lot of just stress that you deal with around that. And so again, like just understanding how you arrive at those decisions and making sure that how you're arriving at those decisions, like you have almost like a policy for how you're reviewing that information and how you come to that decision, will really help you make those decisions in a way that is in line with your values, because you've done it at a time when you are calm, you're centered, you're not stressed, you're not sleepless the way that you might be if you're dealing with a sick resident. So she's crowding me. And it just helps you to get to those good decisions on behalf of your residents. So the other part of our mission, the final part of our mission to talk about, is building community. And I'll be honest, dude, like this is a place where we've really struggled, because like sanctuary work is really, really difficult and taxing. And as a sanctuary that runs on the up and up, one of the most important things that you can do is open the sanctuary to the community, so that like anything else, when there are people like circulating through your whole sanctuary, when people get to see the residents, they get to like see the living areas, when that happens, it creates a level of almost like oversight and transparency to your operations that it just like keeps everybody honest and on the up and up. And we would greatly encourage you, you don't have to do it all the time, like you could have like quarterly open house days, but we'd really encourage you to think about like, what does it mean to be open and transparent to the community, and to even think about the community that you serve and what that looks like. It's also really important to just think about, okay, again, you will hear me say this throughout our review of this book. Whoop! Cat-like reflexes. It's really important to think about like, what is the framework for how you are coming to those decisions? Like, what kind of openings are you going to have for the community? Are you going to have events? Are you going to charge for them? Are you not going to charge for them? If you do charge for them, what's the money going to go to? What kind of events are you, like, do you feel are really important? And what are things that are not in line with your mission? And like, this is an area where we have really tried to think about like, what does it mean to open our doors to the community? And so as we have thought about our framework, there's a couple of decisions that we have made. So the first decision that we've made is that we want to be sure that when we open to the community, we are doing so in a way that first furthers our mission, and second, we are doing it in a way that is respectful of our residents. And what does that mean? So when we think about opening our doors, we believe very strongly that all of the sanctuaries in the entire world cannot save all of these farm animals. And we strongly believe that when people come into contact with our residents, when they hear their stories of neglect and abuse and abandonment, when we respectfully but truthfully talk about animal agriculture and what it means and the journey that some of our residents have had to come to the sanctuary, we believe that that is sort of evangelist work about how the decisions that we make about what we eat impact these amazing, wonderful, sensitive beings. And we strongly feel that opening our doors for tours especially are important for not only the transparency of seeing our operations, but also to tell the stories of our residents in a very meaningful way, to share why we do the work we do and how the individual choices that you make every time you sit down to eat impacts our residents. We also want to be sure that the way that we are opening our doors is in line with our values. And so when you are a sanctuary, if you do open for tours, it is really important that you are operating any type of resident interaction in a way that is respectful to your individual residents. And so like always being mindful that oftentimes, you know, for us, our residents come from horrific situations. Like we talked about the situation that Chris and Buddy came from, and they have come so incredibly far over the last year. And we are really religious about giving the residents the level of autonomy in their like day-to-day living when we do tours, that they don't have to interact with anybody they don't want to, and they don't have to be open to being petted. They don't have to take treats. We definitely do not let people into the individual resident areas, especially with like the cows, because we want to be respectful of the residents. And we know like there are sanctuaries out there who like have baby goat cuddles and calf cuddles and all kinds of stuff. And you know, we talk a lot about it as a sanctuary community, but it's really important to make sure that the way that you are opening your doors and letting people in to interact with your residents really respects like the journey that they've made to get here, as well as their own autonomy to interact or not interact with somebody that they want. We also have just like other rules that might seem a little quirky, but we do them anyway. So for example, like I don't allow alcohol on the sanctuary, and I don't allow alcohol on the sanctuary for a couple of reasons. The first and biggest reason is that I live in a rural community, and last thing that I want in my community is for people to drink alcohol and get in a vehicle, and it's usually like city or suburb people that come to the sanctuary to visit. I don't want them getting in a car and driving around my community after they've been drinking. I don't think that's okay. We have made a decision that that just doesn't happen on the sanctuary. And like Mama is religiously straight edge, and I just don't, I don't think that's something that we want to be a part of. And it's just like, we've just decided that that is not what we're about. And so like, as you think about your own values as a sanctuary, you should also feel like it is okay for you to make decisions about the things you do and how you run your sanctuary and the programs that you offer in your sanctuary, because they are a reflection of your values. And if someone doesn't like that, and someone doesn't like the decisions that you make that are a reflection of your personal values, they can go open their own sanctuary and they can run it however they want. So you should feel comfortable that like you are a grown-ass adult and you can make the decisions that you want to. So as we close up this section, and I promised y'all that I would make this section way shorter than the last one, but it is so important, not just in the running of the sanctuary, but in life itself, is to understand who you are. It's so important to understand what you're about, and it's important to like hold fast to your values and what it is that is okay for you and what it is that you do not want to tolerate. And saying no, it is such an important act of kindness, first and foremost for yourself. And if you are struggling to say no to something, or to say that something's not okay for you, I hope that you realize that you get to make that decision, okay? And I know it feels good to say yes. I know that sometimes you might feel under pressure to say yes. I know that you might be worried about the consequences if you don't say yes to something, or that you might be passing up something really good. But if you are saying yes to something that compromises your needs, your values, what you need to feel good and sort of solid within yourself, dude, just say no. That ain't worth it. Thank you so much for sitting with us for another episode. We look forward to covering the next section shortly, and want to give a huge shout out to all of our supporters, people who volunteer on the sanctuary, people who work on the sanctuary. We could not do this work without you. We will see you at the next section with so much love from the Muddy Pug. Oh, a huge shout out to Arm the Animals. We love your merch.
I know where you are, and I'm coming to carry you home.